Today we're simplifying truth, and you can't see the screen that I have up because it's not there. I have it here, of course, so I can see it. I turned it around, but I don't think you can see it too well from there either. But it's a picture I took of a little finch sitting on top of the tassel of the corn that we had this year. And I really like just taking time to watch nature. I got a good shot of a praying mantis yesterday. There's a whole universe around us, a whole universe that's unfolding, drama and all the stuff that's involved, unfolding around us at all times, and we don't really stop and think about what they're going through, what's happening with these little creatures, and birds in particular I would like to talk about today, because Jesus held them up as an example of a way to prosper. He said, "Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you shall eat or what you shall drink, or about your body, what you shall put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they?" And I think it's interesting that he used such a simple, common example of a model for us to follow in terms of our thinking about just our life in general, about a letting go and trusting. And I was thinking about this bird and birds in general, how they're totally designed to succeed right where they are in their life. And it's hard to see sometimes what it is they would have to eat or whatever. These finches love we have a Asian pear tree. It's just loaded this year again. It's loaded every year. And they get a pretty good share of the pears, which is fine with us because we certainly can't eat them all, and their insects get some of them too and all that. So we provide a lot for our little creatures. But they know exactly how to function, what to look for. They know where to go. They know how to behave. It's not, and you'll never see a finch library. They don't have YouTube. They don't have any of the resources we have to gather knowledge and information. They are born with it. They're hatched with it. It's part of their being. And I think that's what Jesus is saying here. He's saying there's a natural way to be. There's a natural way. There's a flow. We talk about going with the flow. And we are so loaded with ideas and perceptions about what we should be, what prosperity is, what answers to our prayer ought to be, that we hold a lot of preconceptions. And you really don't see that in birds and animals. Jesus raises a puzzle when he suggests as an ideal model for peace of mind and prosperity the birds of the air, who do not sow or reap or gather goods to assure their future. And I think that's really interesting because they don't store into barns. There's no sign that we can tell that they think much of the future. There are animals, of course, like squirrels and whatever that do put food away for the winter and all. But how do they know how to do that? There's no squirrel school I don't think they go to learn how to prosper. No prosperity books for squirrels. It's all part of their being. And so if we think, something as simple as a bird, if they know how to do this, would we not also have that capability that maybe we're not looking at because we are so surface oriented or so technologically minded that we're looking for answers to our lives outside of ourselves somewhere? And there are answers outside of ourselves. There's a lot of good information out there that can help us get along in life, a lot of good practical information. But there's a natural knowing, a natural prospering attitude, a natural sustaining presence that we sort of disconnect from. It's sort of like, as I've talked about before, the stars at night. You know, when you live in a town, in a city with lights and all, we really lose touch with a lot of what's going on in the sky. I've been out several nights in a row. My telescope is currently out of alignment, but I hope to get that back in alignment by tomorrow. But when I was out looking earlier this year, you know, you see all kinds of things going on. I think I saw the space station go over a couple of times. It's not unusual to see satellites floating around up there, but this thing was different. It was much larger, and but the ancient people were really in touch with the sky. Were really in touch with their surroundings, and I'm totally amazed. You remember the 2012 scare, December 21st? The world was supposed to end, the Mayan calendar, and all that stuff. That was an interpretation by people that I guess wanted the world to end, or, you know, that's kind of an old story. Somebody's always wanting it to end. But what the Mayans were actually pointing out was that something in the equator was perfectly lined up with the center of the galaxy, with the center of the universe. And I'm putting this very simply and as a total amateur on this kind of thing, but they knew how to count time in a way that is so predictable that they could predict the 2012 thing from way back when they did it. And it's because they were observers. They were part of their environment. They had some pretty nasty habits too in terms of sacrifice and all that, but they're very intelligent people. But the thing is, most of us are out of touch with that, and we will go to YouTube, or we will go to an encyclopedia, we'll go to some source to gather our knowledge rather than observe ourselves or listen. I think Jesus was a pretty keen observer of the things around him, is why he used something so simple as a bird to, here's how to think of your supply. Here's how to think of God. Here's how to think of how God thinks of you. That if God takes care of the birds, as God obviously does, how much more will God take care of you? But what does that mean? You know, when we hear something like that, what is the God we think of when we hear something like that? The chances are good it's a God somebody gave us. It's not one that we're really in touch with. We see more pictures of stars than we actually see stars. And so the pictures become our reality. I turned on my computer the other day and there was a gorgeous picture of Saturn on there that I guess is part of the Microsoft thing, and I think it was from Hubble or one of the spacecraft that fly around up there. Just totally amazing that we're getting those kinds of things. So it's easy to think, well, I've experienced Saturn now. Well, no, I haven't. I've experienced a picture of it, a beautiful picture, but that's my reality. That's my interpretation now of Saturn. But where did you get your God? Where did your God come from? Is that something of yours? Are you worshiping the Lord your God? Or is it something that has been given to you? Is it a concept that you have grown up with, that's been provided by religious authorities? And that's where so many of us come from, is we have an idea of God, but is it our God? Is it our understanding? Is it our experience? So I think Jesus would sometimes push people, you know, look at this simple animal. It knows how to survive in its environment. It's never been to school, never been instructed. I mean, we could argue that the parent birds would teach them, and they do. You see animals do that, and it's a pretty fascinating thing. But it's a piece of information that can get by us real easy. I was watching this praying mantis, because I get right up on them, and take as close a picture as I can. And even in the photograph, you can hardly see this thing. It blends right in with the sticks. It's just absolutely the same color, and its wings kind of look like leaves or stalks. Its body looks like a stalk or something. You have to really look, even at a close-up photograph. So how does it know how to do that, and what advantage that would be? And it's got this built-in database. How does a spider know to spin a web? What does a spider know about flying insects, about creatures it's never seen before? It's got this built-in knowledge. And I think this is what Jesus is saying. Learn to go within yourself and tune in to the source of your being, because it knows, as he said, your Father knows you have need of all these things even before you ask. But do we listen to how that knowledge, that information is being imparted in the quiet of our being? I've come to believe that if you want to know how to determine whether a prayer is answered or not, the way you tell is by how you feel. It's the shift that occurs in you. It's like, I don't see any evidence of the answer, but I know it's coming forth. It's a knowing. And that's faith, but it's also intuition. It's a combination of faith and intuition. If you are praying for something and you can't reach that point of knowing, then stay with it. I don't mean in the same session necessarily, but come back. If you feel you can't get that feeling of knowing, then go about your business, do something else, and then come back and sit down again and work with this until you know that it's working out. Everything's okay. Somehow it's working out. That there is the same kind of intelligence that's working through the birds is working through you. Very simple, very basic. It's a realization. And birds, I don't think they have these aha experiences, like suddenly they get it, because they've had it all along. It's just part of their being. And it's part of our being, but it gets trained out of us in so many ways. Birds are fully alive. They do not live for the future or regret the past, but are tuned into the now moment. The photograph I have here is of a Gambel's quail. We've got a family of 10 of those running around our yard. I think it's a couple of families that came together, because usually there's about 10 or 12 that hatch. We see them, the little chicks running around, and then pretty soon there's, instead of 10 or 12, there's 5 or 6, and I'm sure the local cats have a heyday with them. But they were reduced to about 5, and now there's 10, and they're almost fully grown. But they come into the yard, and I don't see anything for them to eat, but they see something. They look around, they see what they need, and they come on a fairly regular basis, a daily basis, sometimes more than once. But it's interesting to watch them just forage for food. They know how to do it. And they have all the alert systems. Usually one sits up on the privacy fence watching, and they just kind of know how to succeed. They know how to do what they do. Some of them aren't quite so lucky, I guess, but that's part of nature. Is it produces more than it needs, so it will have enough, so it will have what it needs to keep going. And so you'll have 12 quail chicks, and 5 of them survive, and that's all that's needed for that year. So It seems a little brutal, but it's an intelligent system, and it works quite well. So it's rare to find a person living in the state of harmonious contentment seen in the average bird. We talk about bird brains, and that's not necessarily a bad thing to have a bird brain. It's like a knowing how to succeed in your environment. Isn't that what we all want? And we're striving to do, how to succeed in our environment. And you look at wild animals, they're doing it. They're doing it naturally. They know how to do it. So why would we be created with all these wonderful faculties but not have that? Why would we be created without knowing how to succeed in our environment? And it's not that we don't know, it's that it's been trained out of us. A lot has been trained out of us. We're trained to look at other things as our source of knowledge. I'm talking about the complexity of human thought here. Anthropologists point to things like Neanderthal burials as an indication that humans were beginning to think of life in a larger context than that of physical expression. And the reason I include this is because there is a narrative being spoken about what we are. And we developed, from apes and evolved from apes, and we went along and we were hunter-gatherers for a long time, and the Neanderthal comes along and they start burying their dead. So that means humans, or near humans, started thinking about bigger things at that time. And so we're supposed to follow that, and we're supposed to say, well, that's how we all came about. But there are other people, and I'm quoting or looking here at Michael Cremo. He wrote the book Forbidden Archaeology, and I'm not necessarily endorsing this book. I haven't read it, but I watched an interview on YouTube of him last night. There's quite a bit about him. And he's a very controversial individual, but what he claims is there are two kinds of literature, scientific literature. There's the primary literature, he calls it, which comes directly from field work, field science. And then there's the secondary literature, which is the college textbooks. That's what they want us to hear. That's the aspect of discoveries they want us to hear. What he says in the primary literature, there are archaeologists and anthropologists who have found human remains that are modern human remains in sediments that date back to 300 to 600 million years. And that blows all the Darwinian theories, all of the thoughts that we've been trained, the ways we've been trained to think of ourselves. And so many anthropologists call him a nutcase, but others, he's spoken in nearly every university on the planet. People are interested in what he has to say. It's an alternative way to think of the human being, but you think about how we've been trained to think of ourselves. People raise the question, will science and religion ever come together? I say they already have. Both of them will attack whoever disagrees with them. Science is just as liable to attack people who come up with different ideas or bits of evidence. They're just as likely to suppress that as a pulpit preacher is likely to suppress somebody like us. They don't want to hear new ideas. The Bible says this, and that's the way it is, and we're not going to challenge that. And I've always believed this, I'll always believe it, and if you don't believe it, you'll go to hell. And science does exactly the same thing. If you do not believe in Darwin, if you do not believe we have come from apes and evolved to what we are today, then you've got a problem. And so we think of things like this, and our minds get away from us. They get away from what we are as spiritual beings. What I like about the as I've said many times, the concept of recovery, and we can talk about recovery from alcohol, we can talk about recovery from drugs, we can talk about recovery from sex, we can talk about recovery from a lot of addictions that we have. But what does that mean? To recover means we already had it, and we've lost it. We've given in to something else. We've given something else power over us. And we call that an addiction. And so that's something that's been added. It's not us. But it gives us some reward, some thing that probably doesn't work so well. But we have given ourselves up for something else. We have allowed something to step in and so influence us that becomes a new identity. And so recovery is saying, I'm not that. I'm not that. I'm something that I was before that. I'm the thing I was before that. So I'm getting myself back. Well, as a society, we have been exposed to ideas. You know, you just think about religion. Think about the religion you were raised in. And it's a whole realm of thought, a whole narrative. That where did it come from? There was a time it didn't exist. Where did that come from? It came from people. And people hold up the Bible and say, this is the Word of God. God says this. You know, this is what God says. No, God didn't say that. The Bible was written by people. And it is interpreted by people. And when somebody says, this is the gospel, this is God's word, they don't know what they're saying. They don't understand how this thing came about. They don't understand the evolution it went through. They don't understand the culture it came from and why the particular language is used. They're just parroting something they learned, something they heard from somebody else, some authority. But birds of the air don't have that problem. They don't deal with that kind of garbage. They're not addicted to something that is lesser than what they are at the deepest level, which is why Jesus, I think, held them up as a model, or any natural creature or any natural thing. We become unnatural, and we're in the process of recovering who we are at the deepest level. That's what the whole spiritual thing is about. It's not about becoming something more. It's about understanding what we are now, the spiritual being that we are now. And that is quite a different thing, because you don't go to church to get the rest of yourself. Or you don't go to church because you hope the rest of yourself will be saved. You go to be reminded that you're already okay. You're already whole. But let's recover that wholeness. Let's recover that deeper reality that has gone by the wayside because we have listened to so many people. For a long time, I've suspected that the Darwin thing, the whole humans coming from apes, is not true. But, I mean, the scientists will stand up and they'll beat you over the head with Darwin's book and say it is true, and if you don't believe it, you've got a problem. Mary Leakey found a set of footprints, a long time ago that they say were the feet of modern humans, but the matter, the sediment they were in was way too old. And so they just kind of let that stuff go. Let's not look at that. Let's look over here. That's not important. It's important, but there's got to be a different answer. There's got to be a different way to think of it. But I am interested in this kind of thing, that just we don't really know who we are as a species. We know what we've been told, But there's a whole group of people that are looking at us saying that we have a much longer history than we realize, than we've been told, than we've been taught. And so much information has been suppressed and diverted. And I find that fascinating. You know, it's just something happened 13,000 years ago that changed probably the whole planet. That we came out of an ice age, but there was a major flood at that time. Do some research if you're interested in this kind of thing on the scablands of up in Washington and Dry Falls. And in particular, a person who's following all of this and doing a lot of putting information together is Randall Carlson. Do a little search on him, and you'll find he tells a pretty interesting story. But is that important? Maybe not in particular. Will it help me, with my grocery bill or this or that? Probably not. What it does, though, is it says everything I've learned about myself, it may not be true. I learned that in religion, that I have no doubt that, if I can, my sins can be as scarlet and I'm still not going to go to hell and be punished for eternity. I totally believe that now. I used to be afraid that I could go to hell, that there's this entity called Satan out to get my soul, and I don't believe that anymore. And people will challenge me for that, but I don't really care. That's so far in my rearview mirror, that kind of thinking, that I don't even think about it anymore. But how much do we hold as true that simply is not? We have either thought it ourselves, come up with some scenario, and Jesus is saying, look at these birds, how simple they are. They know how to succeed. So if they know how to do it, surely you, who are greater than the birds, surely you know how. And that's what we want to get in touch with. The birds don't think about things like religion's theories about what happens when they die. They don't entertain ideas of sin and punishment, heaven and hell. I mean, I can't swear that they don't think of those things, but because I don't really know. But they don't act like it. They don't seem too concerned. The only thing they're concerned about, and they don't seem concerned about anything, they're just there and they're living. And they know what to do. They know how to get through the winter. They know how to get through the summer. The advantage they have is they have all the clothes they need all the time. They're feathers. There's no better insulation than feathers. So there's no evidence they do any of these things. They don't get off on tangents. They don't move in directions. So Jesus was suggesting that it is through letting go of our preconceived notions of who and what we are and getting back to our true core that offers the prosperity we seek. So I would say, if you're going through something right now that you are unsure about, and you feel, scattered, you feel afraid, you feel powerless, to just let go of everything, to let go of everything you think you know, let go of what you think ought to be the resolution to this thing. Let go of those voices. Do you have a parent that's sitting on your shoulder saying, you ought to do this, you ought to do that, or if you hadn't done that, you wouldn't be here? And maybe you've got somebody doing that to you. Let that go. You are an expression of God that's happening right now, just like the bird is alive and full of life at this moment. It's like it's rising up and being that right at this moment. And so it is with you and me. And so we get in touch with that. And when you touch that part of yourself, you feel like everything's okay and your prayer is answered. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for that peace that passes all understanding. And it's always present. You're recovering yourself. Okay? Thank you for coming out.
You've been watching a talk presented at the Unity Church of Grand Junction by Reverend Doug Bottorff. We would like to thank everyone who joined us here today in beautiful Grand Junction, Colorado, as well as those of you who are joining us online. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to our channel. Also, please feel free to share this video with anyone you think might be interested or benefit from this message. If this video brought value to your life, please consider making a donation by clicking the link below to our PayPal donation account. Thanks again so much for watching.